All right, welcome back to the Deduction Desk. My name is Joe. This is Sagar, and today we're going to be focusing on a little bit more deeper dive into real estate professional. What a real estate professional is, and really debunking that thought process of, well, if I just go buy a real estate property, all of my problems are solved, right? I don't need to worry about as much income tax anymore because I'm gonna have write-offs and all that stuff. So that's what we're gonna focus on today, right? And I think from a standpoint of individuals who are looking to do as much as they possibly can to reduce their overall tax liability, why would it be beneficial for you to be a real estate professional compared to just buying a real estate property?
And honestly, like something that you'll always hear is, I have an uncle that's in real estate and
Right.
he hasn't paid taxes in years. Or my friend bought a rental property and now he doesn't owe any taxes, right? And yeah, if you do things certain ways and you buy a property every year and you're really good with kind of navigating the depreciation aspect of it, then it is possible to be in that type of scenario. But for 99% of people who are on W-2 high income earners that just want to write off all their income taxes by buying a property, it is exactly what it sounds like, which is too good to be true.
Yeah, and that's like the first part of the topic, right? So you own rental properties, we have nice paper losses, great, perfect. Now we have all of this to set off our W-2 income, but that's not correct.
No, it's not, because the key thing you need to know here is there's two types of income per the tax code, right? There's active income, there's passive income. The active income is the stuff you do every day for work. And beyond that, there is a self-employment tax you pay if you have your own business and you're a single member LLC, or you're an S Corp and you pay W-2 to yourself. Those are things that are your active income. The 1099s you receive that you pay all self-employment tax on, the W-2 that you pay all your payroll taxes on. That is active. Whereas, we know the reality of the situation. You buy a rental property, it's called passive income, but it's definitely not passive. Like, it doesn't feel passive, but per the way that it's coded, it is passive income. It's the equivalent of the dividends you get, the interest that you get. It's all treated the same way. It's money you earn without necessarily having to work for it. And as a result, the way that the government codifies this is the passive losses that you may get, things like depreciation on real estate, cannot be used to offset active income if you make more than a certain amount of income. So for the sake of this conversation, we're going to assume everybody here that is watching this video is making more than $125,000 in active income.
So what if
let's make it 200? Let's make it 200 because there's going to be step ups. There's going to be other criteria that goes in. So let's say you're over $200,000 of active income and you want to buy real estate to offset your losses. It's not going to work unless you do the things we tell you to do here.
Okay, and part of that is being a real estate professional, right?
Exactly.
But let's take a step back. So let's say we're making under $100,000 a year. Number one, I would only assume if you're making under $100,000 a year, your tax liabilities are probably not the biggest concern of yours, number one. And number two, I don't think you're buying real estate for the sake of trying to save in taxes.
Never say never. What if you're like a retired person or you're somebody who sold a bunch of stuff and now you're taking a year off? So yeah, there are those, but you had a very good point, which is the tax liabilities are probably not so high that you need to worry about it.
This is not the reason you're doing it for that purpose, right? You're making $100,000, you're not thinking, oh man, no one wants to pay taxes, right? So that's
or you have really high passive income, right? You get a ton of interest income, you get a ton of dividend income, and you want to offset some of that. Then yes, it could apply towards some of those things where you don't have to be a real estate professional. But for the purposes of what we want to focus on, this is somebody who earns a high W-2 between them and their spouse, or one high earner and one spouse who isn't working. This is where we kind of want to tackle some of the misconceptions that are out there.
So let's talk about that. So now we have an understanding that it's not as easy as it sounds. If we're making over 200,000, we're the only income earner, and now we have to define what a real estate professional is or real estate professional status. How would you define that?
All right, so the first thing is, why would we want real estate professional status, right? And the purpose of being considered a real estate professional is now all this passive losses that you aren't able to use against your active W-2 income is now able to be used against the active income that you're earning, right? Because when you're considered a real estate professional, that's your job, it's active income now. Those active losses
can go to the rest
can now be used against your active W-2 income. And you can start wiping wiping away the tax liability from
when
your
you put it that
W-2s.
way, it makes more sense, right? Because there is active income and then there's passive income. But if we become a real estate professional, we're just changing the wording of passive to active.
That's it.
So now it is active for us,
Correct.
and therefore we can offset
Yeah.
some of those other opportunities.
Great. Once again, not as easy as it sounds.
Sure.
Right? Because there's 3 criteria to be considered a real estate professional. So first thing, you don't have to have a license. You don't have to go to school.
That's
for
what I was
real
going to
estate.
say. That's probably the first thought in everybody's head is I'm not getting my real estate license.
And you know what? You don't need to do that. And it's probably not the hardest thing in the world to do. Like it's hard to be a real estate agent. It's not hard maybe necessarily to be
pass the test.
to be considered, to be qualified to be a real estate agent, right?
Sure.
But you don't even have to do that.
Right.
You have to meet 3 criteria. The first one is you have to do 750 hours a year of real estate. So
define activities that would constitute that. Collecting rent, changing,
Yes.
cleaning the apartment.
yes, talking to contractors,
Yeah, talking to contractors.
drawing construction plans,
Yeah.
looking on Zillow,
Not as
maybe not.
I mean, how many hours could you could? I mean, if it was up to my wife, she'd already be a real estate professional.
Yeah.
75 hours.
Yeah.
Looking at Zillow, that we don't need a house because we just got one. We're trying to define what those 750 hours a year are, and I think depending on what your real estate situation is, whether it's one rental property, right? I guess the argument would be, could you define it as an active business when you have an annual tenant that is just renting the place out and all you're doing is collecting rent?
That doesn't matter, right? It's about these 3 things, right? So the first one is the 750 hours, right? The second one is a material participant, which kind of plays into what you're talking about. But
Sure.
Material participant basically means that you can't just go buy a bunch of REIT stocks and say I'm a real estate professional.
That's passive.
That's passive. I can't go and be a 10% partner in a real estate property that Joe is going to manage, own, and run, and I don't want anything to do with it other than put some money in and hopefully collect some rent.
Sure.
That's not material participation. You have to be running and managing the property. Like, we all know what that means. And people will try to find gray areas. If you're looking for a gray area, don't go down this path because this is a highly audited status to go for. So be active in your property, and then you can take the active losses. So that's criteria number 2. Criteria number 3, 51% of your working time should be spent in real estate. So what does that mean? If you work a 40-hour-a-week job and you're telling me that you're a real estate professional, you need to show me that you do 41 hours a week of real estate. Okay? So that's really where these things start getting hairy, when somebody has a full-time job and then they also want to make themselves a real estate professional.
Well, and I think we have to remember from the other videos that we spoke about, you always have to assume the IRS is under the impression that you didn't do this and you have to prove it.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking, all right, well, I did 41 hours this week and I did 41 hours every week on top of my job, could you prove it? Could you go into the IRS? Could you put enough documentation together to justify you saying, here's 41 hours of work every week in addition to my other job?
Yeah.
And that's where this particular avenue and why this video is being created comes into play, because it is highly audited, because there's so many people that try and do it.
Yeah, and if anything else that we've learned from this is, hey, you can say whatever the heck you want and take a shot, and you can probably try to file a return with that, but it's not going to stand up to the IRS if you get audited, right?
Yeah.
I think there was a famous story of a guy who made an LLC called Dodge Hellcat LLC during PPP. And literally all they did in that LLC was take a PPP loan and buy a Dodge Hellcat. And they got in trouble, and I'm pretty sure that guy went to jail. So look, did he get the PPP money? Yes. Did he go and buy his Hellcat? Yes.
Yeah.
Did he end up in jail?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Did it last long? Not really.
Yeah, exactly. So we try to guide you in ways that are going to be things that you can sleep at night and take advantage of the tax code. That's the ideal situation to be. So not everything is for everyone, but we've now gone over those 3 criteria. I think, a place to look at this is hey, I may not qualify for the 40 hours a week because I'm working full time. I'm working really hard at my particular craft, and I'm making more money from this than I would becoming a real estate professional. Maybe your spouse is not making a lot of money, right? But we have a very famous example in our office of a client. We talk about this all the time. This gentleman was making $1 million a year, and he was making, on W-2, he was paying quite a bit of tax on that, obviously,
yeah.
right? He also lived in New York City, so he's paying city tax, which means his highest end of the tax bracket is almost 50%. His wife was making about $100,000 a year, which is a great career to have.
Sure.
But because of his income, she was paying 50% of what she made in taxes. So she liked her job, she didn't love it, and she certainly didn't like that she was making 50% of
right.
the income she made, right?
Sure.
We did some math and we looked at their situation. He was paying somewhere around $400,000 in taxes yearly. And we did the math on it. We said, look, if you buy this particular $2.5 million property, your wife quits her job, she spends all her time on this property, the property is in her name, she's the one that's going to manage it. In that particular scenario, she can become a real estate professional, and that $100,000 salary, which is really $50,000 at the end of the day, after their down payment, they ended up getting about $380,000 in tax refunds.
Tax refunds.
Tax refunds.
On top of, but he still owed.
So he still owed the tax, right? He owed the money. Here's how.
But they got $300,000 back.
They got $300,000 back.
Right.
So
you
on
turned
the down payment,
$50,000 job into a
$330,000 gain for their family by quitting her job.
Right.
So there are situations where it makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to do it the right way, and I'm going to take advantage of these laws, right? It may sound backwards in your mind to say, hey, leave your job to go do this. That's going to cost you a $2 million purchase. But at the end of the day, they swapped their tax bill with a down payment on a $2.5 million property.
Yeah,
and
now
that
they have a property and made more money that year.
Exactly.
And I think for those of the people that are, especially the ones that are watching this video in particular, you're looking for those opportunities, right? So you have to start thinking outside of the box and how you participate in that. So we can stay on that example. We can use a different example, but like financially, it matters because of that example in particular. We have $1 million of W-2 income. We're at the highest tax bracket we could possibly be at. And now my spouse makes $50,000. But if they were a real estate professional, all the money that I would have spent on taxes, I could buy another property and make you your income and then some.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we've talked about it before. There's that Airbnb rule.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So is there a difference in our conversation from this being an Airbnb to an annual rental
100%.
to a 6-month rental?
100%.
So let's talk about that.
You don't need to be a real estate professional to qualify for the Airbnbs to be deductible against your income.
Right.
So you can go and buy an Airbnb, put it into service, and use the strategies of the depreciation to offset your W-2 income. Why? Because an Airbnb is considered active as long as the average tenant stay is less than 7 days on any rental. So if I'm renting to Joe on a weekly basis, or I'm not just Joe, but I'm renting to everybody in the office and people are coming in for 1 week at a time, that counts as an Airbnb, active business. I can use it against my active income. However, if you're renting to tenants on a monthly basis, then it's not considered active, it's considered passive.
Well, that was part of my conversation before, right? If someone's living there for 6 months, how much work do you actually have to do, right?
100%.
So the IRS got ahead of it and said, you can't buy an Airbnb and rent it out so less work is done for you and you get the
100%.
They want you to work for it.
100%.
Which makes sense.
So if that's the case, right, then we've also discussed in our videos on some of the Airbnb stuff, which you can see here. So we've seen before that Airbnbs are not always the best investment, right? Like Airbnbs can be a money pit. So it may not be the right move to buy something that's going to lose you money. And you may actually say, hey, I'd rather put my money towards something that's a safer, steadier stream of income, a yearly tenant, and maybe the places you're looking are not Airbnb friendly. Maybe you're somewhere that's, you know.
Maybe you're in like a suburb.
Exactly, right? So if that's the case, then I think that the benefit here is if you truly want to go towards a real estate portfolio and you want to take it to offset some of the income you're making, and you can have the best of both worlds if one of the two spouses is a real estate professional.
Real estate professional. And I think that gets discredited so many times through conversations with clients because I feel like everyone in their mind thinks, okay, well, how do I become successful? All right, well, I need to own real estate and I need to own a lot of it. But the downfalls of owning real estate are all the things that we don't think of because we only think about the sexy part, right? Oh, well, look at my property. I own a property in this state, and I own this and this. But what happens if the tenant doesn't pay rent? Or what happens if they stop paying? Or what happens if, now you're stuck with multiple payments, or there's more damage done to the house or the property than you thought, and you have to put more money into it in order for it to be livable.
Yeah.
So there's so many different parts of this that you have to take into consideration, almost to an extent that I would consider, I wouldn't even do it unless I was able to have someone dedicated as a real estate professional. So I wouldn't have to worry about those things if we continue to build
100%. So once again, I don't want to downplay the power of real estate in the tax code right now.
No, it's definitely powerful.
It's the best time ever to be a real estate professional from a tax perspective. So it'd be foolish to not look into these things. And it's good that you are looking at these things because your mind is in the right place on where to find tax savings. That being said, you have to know that what you're hearing online sometimes about how buy it and you're good to go, it's not true. And you need to make sure that you are able to tailor yourself around this. So I want to leave with like another example of something that we talked about, which is there's a famous tax law case of a doctor who was a full-time practicing physician. He was an emergency room doctor, which means he's typically 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So you have a stretch of time where you're on call, and whether you're physically in the hospital or you're just ready to be at the hospital at any given moment, that's a 2-week period. And then you have 2 weeks full-time where you're just off. Right? So this gentleman was heavily into real estate. He had a huge portfolio of properties. He was spending a ton of time on those properties. And his goal was to eventually stop practicing medicine and becoming a real estate professional. He said he was a real estate professional because he said, I'm working more time. I'm working the entire time during the 2 weeks that I'm off. Whereas during the 2 weeks that I'm on, half the time I'm on call, but I'm not in the hospital.
Right.
So those are not hours where I'm actually working.
So perfect candidate sounds like for this scenario.
It would sound hairy to me.
Sure.
But he had a tax attorney that really backed him up on this, which is what we do all the time. When we're not sure on something, we bring in tax attorneys and we get an opinion from them. And the tax attorney said, hey, you actually qualify. And as he started tuning down some of his hours at the hospital, he did start qualifying as a real estate professional. He got audited and he went all the way to tax court, to the highest level of tax court. And the ending result was you are a real estate professional because you documented your hours, you proved you were a material participant, and you spent 51% of all of your working time in real estate versus any other job, including practicing medicine. So if you follow things the right way, even situations that may sound too good to be true can be true. But for the most part, beware of what you see on the internet.
Yeah, and thank you guys. Thanks for joining, and I look forward to seeing you guys on our next video. Thanks.